I was missing compassion. I realized after recording this video, which if you're watching, you'll see I have curly hair, so it'll be obvious this is an addition. Watch till the end so you can get the full story if this is useful for you. I had a very surprising realization recently. If you know me, you know these do come quite hard and fast, but particularly good one. Not great when I first realised it, and I felt a bit silly or stupid, to be honest, but it was a really great thing to see, and I'm hoping it'll be useful for you if I share about my experience. So what I realised is that I will have a terrible experience rather than another experience that I want less. What I mean by that is something I realised about my anxiety or feeling anxious. So I've had anxiety as long as I can remember, and it's been at harder and easier times. And as we sit here now, I have it really largely managed in lots of ways comparatively. And it still can be an issue for me, right? But it's very automatic to feel that feeling. If you have had anxiety or feelings of anxiety, you know that feeling of that tension in your body or sort of ruminating worries that don't really land. They're just sort of an energy in you and a feeling in you of vibration, right? Uncomfortable vibration. At its lesser part, when it's at its worst, it's kind of hell on earth, particularly if you're trying to resist it or are scared what it is. So I will feel anxious a lot, right? Like feel this vibration, feel this concern. And I don't know how I saw it, but one day I realised when I was feeling anxious, for me, and as usual, put the asterisks, I'm not talking about mental illness or diagnosed or any of that stuff. I'm just talking about my experience of my version of anxiety. I noticed that I was actually choosing it, not consciously as usual until I saw it, but I was trying to choose the pain of anxiety over the pain of what I was responsible for. Crazy, right? Why would anyone choose anxiety? It's the worst, particularly when it's bad. It is so bad. But what I realized was I'd rather choose anxiety for being responsible for whatever choice I made for the week or the day that I was resisting. So I'll give you an example. If I had some training coming up, this is very common because I was very anxious a lot of the time I trained, I would feel anxious. If I looked what was under that, like I've called this episode the upside down, what it was that I had chosen to train. I didn't want to, or I didn't want to prep it, or I didn't want to do whatever was involved with it. And instead of taking responsibility for the choice, I put kind of anxiety over the top. Because if I was responsible for the choice, like the psychologists would say, I had an internal locus of control. It was my choice. It was only happening because I'd chosen it. But if I was anxious, anxiety's happening to me. Poor me, I'm anxious. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm an anxious person. So it was really tricky to see it, right? Like Mark Manson, and he probably got it from somewhere else, but he talks about the idea of which pain do you choose, because there's pain in everything. One of my life sayings, I suppose, is there's good and bad in everything. And I've said that for a long time, and it kind of ties into this, right? Like, what pain do you choose? So I was choosing feeling like a victim and suffering and anxiety, but I was choosing that over not being a victim and feeling what did I put in this week? Or why did I do that? Or I don't want to do that, whatever it might be, right? So there's lots of examples of which pain do you choose that you might find useful if you haven't heard it before. The pain of being overweight versus the pain of exercise, the pain of quitting smoking versus the pain of some terrible disease potentially, the pain of an awkward conversation or a difficult conversation versus the pain of unresolved relationships, etc., right? We're always choosing our pain. I just didn't realise that anxiety was one of my choices. And like I said, please don't take that personally if you struggle with anxiety at a clinical level. And, it's not the experience I have, it's your own, right? But geez, it can be useful to see if you are like me and think, where am I just not wanting to take responsibility, and I'll actually suffer in that rather than own it. So that came from much more of a lifetime habit. And what I realised, and I realised it a while ago, but it keeps coming back in new levels of clarity, I actually worry recreationally. And what a great decision. So when I was a child, I grew up in Perth, and I know that a lot of you won't be watching or listening in Perth, but if you're around my age and from this little corner of the world, let's just say it wasn't very dynamic when I was a child. It's basically New York compared with what it was like in the mid-70s. And if you are from here, you'll remember that the shops were not open on the weekend. If you wanted petrol on a Sunday, you had to hope your car would make it to the roster station, which was about 6 petrol stations in Perth. And there was virtual tumbleweeds rolling through the city on the weekend, right? Didn't suit me, didn't suit my personality. I love life. I love the world. I hope you can tell I'm really into everything, right? So I was like, what the hell? Why was I born into this corner of the world where nothing's happening? And so I got really bored. I had a lot of time as a child bored. And, you know, we used to make up games and do all that thing that 70s kids did when there was no iPads. But I watched a lot of telly. There was a telly. Anyway, I decided I'm not going to be bored. I'm going to be anything but bored. And I have not been bored in about probably 45 years. The only problem is I've been extremely worried for that whole time. And I made a choice, right? Like, I want to be active. I want to feel like I'm in action. I want to feel like stuff's happening. Worrying is very distracting. It's very busy making. And, you know, you can spend all of your time doing that. I have spent a lot of time doing that. It's a tragedy when I say it, actually, and think about it. But, you know, I'm 52 and I'm getting these realizations. I feel like I'm a little bit behind, but what can you do? So the other day I'm at home and I think I have this really clear thought. I worry as a hobby. I worry just as an automatic thing. It's so automatic that I didn't even realize I was doing it. So I was sitting at home the other day and this came to me at a new level of clarity, right? Like, I have all these positive things I want to do and I haven't done a lot of them because I have this habitual thing around worrying and staying very still. They're connected. I must worry and sit very still. I have art I can do, I have tidying I can do, I have decorating I can do, I have exercise I can do. I have a passionate love for my indoor plants. There is so much positive I could do. And this has been a wonderful revelation because realizing I'm choosing it, even though it was so automatic I didn't see it, now I can go, okay, worry's automatic. It's going to come up. You've practiced it forever. The neurons in your mind are like ropes, you know, Rick Hansen, what wires together, ties together. But I've seen it now. So I can go, okay, you want to spend the next hour worrying or you want to spend the next hour painting? And there's a very famous YouTuber in Australia called Struthless, and he wrote a book called, I feel like it's called Doom and Bloom, but I'll put the link in. And he talks about this idea of creativity versus negative thinking. I haven't read the book yet, but what I would say is for me, there was no point in trying to get creative until I unlocked the mystery of what was stopping me. And it has stopped me and had me very still in many ways, trying to stay safe while analysing life and worrying internally rather than taking positive action. I will have to risk space. I will have to risk potentially boredom. That one's tricky to face. But if I'm willing to create space and not use worry as my main hobby, wow, like what a nicer life available. So, as usual, hope you got something from that. If you didn't, I'm very glad. But if you did, awesome. What are you going to do with it? Do yourself a favour. When I shared this story about worrying as a hobby, I do still find that true for myself. But what I was lacking was a level of compassion for myself and therefore potentially for yourself as a watcher or listener in this episode, because I learned something new since recording it. And if you've watched some of my recent episodes, you might notice that I make additions because I learned so quickly. I realised, oh, it's not current anymore. I have to add to it to make it the full story. So what I have to add to this one is from listening to Stephan Bodian. You know him if you've listened to me. Infinite Awakening is his latest book. He is my hero. Talking to one of his expert friends on his podcast, Stephen's podcast, who I believe's name is John Prendergast. Now, they were talking about the fact that when one has had a traumatic experience and reacted to that a particular way, in my case, in an anxious way, one will automatically go back to that particular reaction or feeling state. And they don't use the term habit like I've said in the video here. I talk about that I've had worries as a hobby, as I said, and I said I feel like I have, and that kind of makes sense to me. But what they helped me see was, if we look at it more compassionately, what comes up very automatically for people is when you have had a previous, what I would call, or experts would call, a little t trauma that's in your background, and all of us have had little t traumas, and of course many people have had big T traumas, we will have an automatic reaction to that. That reaction can get stuck and it becomes a habitual thing in the system. I have an awareness now that it's happening. Whilst I will still go to it automatically, I have a level of choice. And it's sometimes available because sometimes it just is automatic and I don't catch it, right? But what I want for me or for you is the extra level of compassion around, at least initially, we're not really even conscious around these habits. And even once I've seen it, I can realise it'll still get me automatically from this background of little t trauma. And so it's a good context, a compassionate context to it. One of the things I'd also mention here, in case it's useful for you or people you know, is you'll see a version of this running where people have one drama after another in their life. So you'll meet people that are, I don't know if the right term is addicted to drama. You'll see that term bandied about and it probably lacks compassion, but they experience life in a particular way for whatever reason. So they might have a habitual habit of bad things happen to me. And so one bad thing after another happens. And when I think about people in my own life with this propensity, for some of them, their life is stranger than fiction. The number of things that can happen in one life that are very difficult. And it's just one person. And even as I say it, it feels so harsh to say that they might be choosing that. What I will say is I don't believe for a moment they're choosing it consciously. For some reason, the expression of their trauma looks like that. So mine comes out in different ways: internalising worry, lack of positive action, procrastination, self-doubt, ruminating. They're not helpful at all to anyone external and terribly bad for me. Whereas for other people, they'll come out with external events, relationships issues, accidents, one thing after another, somehow expressing this anxiety or difficulty or pain. So I hope that makes sense and adds an extra context to what you both hear about my story, but also what might be happening for you. What is it that could be running underneath that, whatever it is you are doing, you currently feel is a better decision, consciously, but more likely unconsciously? How can the upside down be a happier place for you or for me? So I hope you find it useful. I hope you do it yourself a favour and be bravely loving to you first and then those around you. Lots of love. Thanks for being here. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. And if you like what you've heard about me, you can see more here.